It was supposed to be a routine visit. Vanessa Johnson, the CEO and founder of the prestigious Johnson Heights Hotel, had just returned from a whirlwind business trip overseas. She was excited to be back at the place she had built from the ground up, a place that had become a symbol of her success and the epitome of luxury in the hospitality industry. But little did she know, this return would turn into one of the most shocking moments of her life. As Vanessa approached the front entrance of her hotel, her eyes scanned the familiar, glittering lobby through the glass doors. She took a deep breath, her mind already running through meetings and plans for the coming days. She was ready to pick up where she left off, leading her team, meeting with investors, and continuing to push her empire forward. But as soon as she stepped inside, something was off. The usual warmth and bustle of the hotel seemed absent. The front desk was quieter than usual, and the two young women standing behind the counter didn't seem to recognize her at all. Vanessa approached the desk with a smile, ready to greet her staff and perhaps even surprise them with her sudden return. "Hi there, I'm Vanessa Johnson, the CEO," she said casually, her tone light, expecting the usual warm welcome. The receptionist, a woman with light blonde hair and a slightly distracted expression, didn't even glance up immediately. After a moment, she finally raised her eyes to meet Vanessa's. "I'm sorry, ma'am, you'll have to wait in line," the receptionist said, her voice distant, almost dismissive. Vanessa's smile faltered. "Wait in line? I'm the CEO. I'm just checking in to make sure everything is running smoothly." The other receptionist, a younger woman with dark hair, finally looked up, and both women exchanged a quick glance. Vanessa's heart began to race as the silence between them stretched on, thick with confusion. "I'm sorry, but if you're here for a room, we'll need your ID to check in," the first receptionist said, still showing no sign of recognition. A knot of unease tightened in Vanessa's stomach. She glanced around the lobby, her eyes darting to the security personnel at the entrance, who didn't seem to be reacting to her presence. This wasn't right. "You really don't recognize me?" Vanessa asked, her voice now laced with disbelief. The two receptionists looked at each other, clearly uncertain how to proceed. They still didn't react as though anything was amiss. One of them cleared her throat and repeated the same line. "We need your ID, ma'am." Vanessa felt a wave of frustration build up inside her. She knew what was happening. She could feel it in her gut. This wasn't just a mistake. They were treating her like any other guest, someone who had no business walking into the lobby of the hotel she owned. What was going on? Vanessa took a deep breath, trying to keep her cool. She looked over at the security guard again, who now seemed to be watching her more closely than before. The sense of alienation in her own hotel was growing. What was happening to her company? This wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was something far bigger. What would she do next? Before she could even process her next move, Vanessa realized there was a deeper problem here. She wasn't just facing a minor hiccup, she was facing an outright rejection. A rejection that not only stung her pride, but also raised questions about the state of her own empire. As Vanessa stood there trying to make sense of it all, one thought rang clear in her mind. This wasn't just about a hotel, it was about her legacy. What happened next would change everything. Vanessa Johnson wasn't just any CEO, she was a trailblazer, a woman who had fought every step of the way to build her empire. Her story began in a small town, far from the glossy high-end hotels she would later own. Raised by her mother, a single parent who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, Vanessa learned early on the value of hard work and resilience. From a young age, Vanessa was determined not to be defined by her circumstances. She excelled in school, pushed herself in every extracurricular activity, and never let the struggles of her childhood become an excuse. But while her ambition set her apart, it also made her a target. In high school, Vanessa faced prejudice and bias from both students and teachers who underestimated her because of her race. However, instead of letting their small-mindedness hold her back, Vanessa used it as fuel. Every no she received only made her more determined to prove them wrong. After earning a scholarship to a prestigious university, she pursued a degree in business administration. It was there that she first discovered her passion for hospitality She worked part-time at a small boutique hotel where she learned the ropes of the industry from the ground up, everything from guest services to marketing. But more than the technical skills, it was the relationships she formed with the staff and guests that solidified her dream of owning a hotel one day. When Vanessa graduated, she didn't follow the traditional path many of her peers took. Instead, she took a risk, using all the savings she had and a loan from a local bank to purchase a rundown hotel. She knew it was a gamble, but she was willing to risk everything for the chance to create something truly her own. The early days were rough. Vanessa faced challenges at every turn: financial struggles, skepticism from investors, and the constant pressure of being one of the few women of color in the industry. But she never backed down. Slowly but surely, she built Johnson Heights Hotel into a thriving business. She poured her heart into every decision, ensuring that her hotel wasn't just a place to stay, but an experience, a reflection of her values of excellence, inclusivity, and personalized service. As her success grew, so did the hotel's reputation. What started as a small independent hotel soon became a chain, with multiple locations across the country. Vanessa became known as one of the most influential CEOs in the hospitality industry, admired for her sharp business acumen and her ability to lead with both heart and mind. Despite her success, Vanessa never allowed herself to forget her roots. She made sure to hire employees from diverse backgrounds, believing that inclusivity wasn't just a buzzword. It was the key to creating a company culture where everyone felt valued. She was a mentor to young women in business and often spoke about her struggles and triumphs to inspire others. But even with all of her accomplishments, Vanessa still struggled with the harsh reality of being a woman of color in a predominantly white and male-dominated industry. She had faced countless microaggressions, dismissive comments, and outright racism, but each time she powered through. The scars of those experiences had shaped her into the resilient woman she was today. They had prepared her for moments like this, when the very place she had built from the ground up seemed to be turning against her. Yet as she stood there at the front desk of her own hotel, it wasn't just her race that had her questioning everything. It was the treatment she was receiving from her own staff. She had always prided herself on building a company where respect and professionalism were paramount. But here, at the very heart of her business, she was being treated like a stranger. As the days passed and the initial shock began to wear off, Vanessa's frustration grew. The incident at the front desk wasn't just an isolated mistake. It was a sign of something much deeper. She began to wonder if there was a growing disconnect between the vision she had worked so hard to build and the reality of how her employees viewed her. Was her success being overshadowed by assumptions about her capabilities simply because of her race and gender? Who were these people working for her? And more importantly, what was happening to her hotel? Vanessa had no intention of letting this go. She was determined to get to the bottom of it and find out why two employees who should have known her better than anyone had rejected her so publicly. But she knew this wasn't just about a single moment. It was about ensuring that her business was built on the values she had worked so hard to establish. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Vanessa wasn't going to sit idly by. She had built an empire, and she wasn't about to let it crumble due to ignorance or disrespect. Vanessa Johnson had always prided herself on being a strong, decisive leader. She'd built her empire from the ground up, and she wasn't about to let a few rogue employees or a sudden moment of doubt take it all away from her. But the incident at the front desk, being treated like a stranger in her own hotel, was just the beginning. It was a wake-up call, one that forced her to face the reality that something was very wrong at Johnson Heights Hotel. That evening, after her encounter at the front desk, Vanessa called a private meeting with her trusted assistant, Rachel, and the head of security, Tim. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. They sat together in her sleek, modern office, a room that felt strangely empty to her now despite the grandeur it once represented. "Rachel, Tim, I need to understand what's going on. Today, I was turned away at the front desk. No one recognized me, and I was treated like any other guest. This is not a mistake. Something is happening here, Vanessa said, her voice steady but laced with frustration. Rachel, who had been with Vanessa for years, looked concerned but remained silent. Tim, however, took a deep breath before speaking. He'd been with the hotel from the very beginning and knew the ins and outs of everything. "I've noticed a few things lately," Tim said cautiously. "There's been some tension among the staff. I'm not sure if it's just internal drama, but we've had a few complaints from customers about unprofessional behavior. I don't know if it's directly linked to what happened today, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on." Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What kind of complaints, and why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" Tim hesitated for a moment, glancing at Rachel before speaking. "I didn't want to cause unnecessary panic. Most of the issues were minor, late check-ins, some miscommunications, but there have been murmurs among the staff about changes you've made recently. Some people aren't happy with the new policies, and I think there might be some resentment building." Vanessa's mind raced. She had implemented new policies to streamline operations, improve customer service, and make the company more inclusive. But it seemed those decisions hadn't been as well received as she'd hoped. She turned to Rachel. "What about you? Have you noticed anything?" Rachel, ever the loyal assistant, bit her lip before speaking. "I've heard some whispers in the break room. Nothing concrete, but there are definitely people talking. They seem to think that some of the changes you've made are making things more difficult, and I don't think they realize how much you've had to sacrifice to get to this point." Vanessa let out a deep sigh, running a hand through her hair. She knew she couldn't ignore the situation anymore. This wasn't just about the two employees at the front desk anymore. It was bigger than that. There was a growing divide within her company, and if she didn't address it soon, the hotel and her reputation could be at risk. "We need to find out who's behind this," Vanessa said, her voice resolute. "I'm not going to let this company fall apart because of a few people who don't understand what it took to get here." Tim nodded. "I'll start by reviewing the security footage from the front desk. We'll look for anything unusual." Rachel added, "I can talk to some of the other employees, see if anyone else has noticed anything strange. If there's a problem, we need to get ahead of it before it spreads." Vanessa stood up, her mind made up. "Good. I'll also set up a series of one-on-one meetings with some of the senior staff. We need to address this before it escalates." As the meeting ended and the two of them left, Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that something much darker was brewing beneath the surface. This wasn't just employee dissatisfaction, it felt like a betrayal. But by whom? The next few days were a blur of interviews and investigations. Tim was able to pull up the security footage from the day Vanessa had been turned away, but it didn't show anything out of the ordinary. The two receptionists appeared to act professionally, no signs of misconduct or unusual behavior. But Vanessa wasn't convinced. There had to be more to it. Then, one afternoon, Rachel came into Vanessa's office with a folder in hand, her face serious. She placed it on the desk and slid it toward Vanessa. "I spoke with several employees, and it seems like there's been a lot of behind-the-scenes chatter that you weren't aware of," Rachel began. "There are whispers about you not being hands-on enough lately, and how some of the new policies are making people feel alienated. But there's one person who seems to be stirring things up more than anyone else." Vanessa's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "Sarah," Rachel said quietly. "She's been very vocal about her dissatisfaction with your management style. She's been trying to rally others, get them to question your decisions, and there are rumors that she's been in contact with some of the hotel's investors, trying to undermine your authority." Vanessa felt the ground shift beneath her. Sarah. The name struck a chord. Sarah was a senior manager who had worked for the hotel for years, someone Vanessa had trusted. She'd been loyal, hard-working, and an essential part of the team. But if what Rachel was saying was true, everything had changed. Suddenly, Vanessa understood. This wasn't just a minor disagreement. It was a coordinated effort to take her down from within. She had never expected someone she had mentored, someone she had trusted, to be the one behind the push to undermine her leadership. But as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Vanessa knew what she had to do. She couldn't afford to sit back and let this grow any larger. It was time to confront Sarah and anyone else who might be involved in this betrayal. Vanessa knew this was it, the moment where everything would change. The investigation had revealed the uncomfortable truth. Sarah, one of her senior managers, was at the center of a conspiracy to undermine her leadership. But what Vanessa didn't know was how deep the betrayal ran. How many more were involved? Was this something as simple as disgruntled employees, or was it the beginning of something much darker, something that could destroy everything she had worked for? She couldn't waste any more time. Sarah had to be confronted. That afternoon, Vanessa called Sarah into her office. As she stood in front of her sleek, polished desk, she couldn't help but feel a knot of unease tighten in her stomach. This was someone she had trusted, someone she had mentored, someone who had been a key part of her hotel's success. How had things gone so wrong? When Sarah walked in, her face was calm, almost too calm. She was a tall woman, mid-30s, with sharp features and a composed demeanor that Vanessa had always admired. But today there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something Vanessa couldn't quite place. "Sarah, have a seat," Vanessa said, her voice steady but laced with authority. Sarah sat down, folding her hands on her lap, her eyes trained on Vanessa. "I don't have much time." "What's this I hear about you trying to undermine me?" Vanessa asked, her voice cutting through. The tension in the room. For a moment, Sarah didn't respond. She sat there staring at Vanessa, as though weighing her options. Then, with a faint smile, she spoke. "I don't know what you're talking about, Vanessa. I've always been loyal to you and the company." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Loyal? Really? Because according to my sources, you've been rallying employees against me, questioning my decisions, and even reaching out to investors behind my back. Don't try to play innocent, Sarah. I know what's been going on." A brief flash of surprise crossed Sarah's face before she quickly masked it. "You've got it all wrong. I've always had the hotel's best interests at heart. I'm just trying to ensure that the business is run efficiently and that we're not making decisions that could harm us in the long run." Vanessa stood up and walked around her desk, taking a slow, deliberate step toward Sarah. "You don't get it, do you? I've spent years building this hotel, pouring my blood, sweat, and tears into it, and you, of all people, are trying to tear it down, trying to convince people that I'm not qualified to lead." Sarah stiffened in her chair. "I'm not trying to tear anything down. I'm trying to bring some balance, some reason. There are people here who feel like you've changed, like you're not the same person you used to be." Vanessa's jaw clenched. "Changed? How do you figure?" "You've been distant," Sarah continued, her voice softening slightly. "Ever since you started expanding the business, you've become more focused on the bigger picture. The new policies, the changes you've made, they're not sitting well with the staff. They feel like you don't understand what's really going on here anymore, and I'm just trying to protect the people who've been here since the beginning." Vanessa felt a surge of anger rise in her chest. "So what? You think you know better than me? You think I'm not doing what's best for the company?" "No, I'm not saying that," Sarah said quickly, her voice tinged with frustration. "But sometimes the people on the ground level see things differently than the people at the top. The changes you've made, they're alienating the staff. People feel like they don't have a voice anymore, like they don't matter." The word stung. Vanessa had always prided herself on being in tune with her employees, on creating a culture of openness and respect. But what Sarah was saying, it made sense in a way. Maybe, in her drive to expand the business, she had lost touch with the people who had helped her get to where she was. Maybe her focus on the bigger picture had caused her to neglect the very foundation of her success: her staff. Vanessa took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. "So? Is that what this is? About you're not trying to destroy me, you're just protecting the staff?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her earlier composure cracking. "I'm just trying to do what's best for the hotel. I didn't mean for any of this to go as far as it has. But some people, they feel like you've lost sight of what made Johnson Heights great in the first place." Vanessa paused, her mind racing. She had been so focused on growth and expansion that she hadn't noticed the cracks forming within the team. She had always been the one pushing for progress, for new ideas, but in doing so, had she alienated the very people who had made her dream a reality? The room fell silent for a long moment as Vanessa processed everything Sarah had said. Finally, Vanessa spoke, her voice firm but calm. I built this company from the ground up, Sarah. I didn't get here by ignoring my employees or pretending that things were perfect. I've always believed in honesty, in open communication, and in listening. But if you think that I'm going to let a small group of people destroy everything I've worked for, you're wrong. We are going to work through this, together. Sarah didn't reply immediately, and for a second Vanessa wasn't sure if she had broken through to her, or if she was simply holding on to her own agenda. But then Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand," she said quietly. "But I think you need to start listening more to the people who matter." Vanessa stared at her for a long moment. It was clear Sarah wasn't going to back down easily, but then again neither was she. The power struggle was only beginning. The confrontation with Sarah had left Vanessa shaken, but not defeated. She had faced adversity before and had always come out stronger on the other side. But this felt different. The trust that had once defined her relationship with her staff had been eroded. Now, it wasn't just about fighting for her company. It was about proving to herself that she could regain control, rebuild the trust she'd lost, and restore the heart of Johnson Heights Hotel. Vanessa spent the following days reviewing all aspects of the company, from the daily operations to the overall culture. She wanted to understand exactly where things had gone wrong. It wasn't just Sarah, and it wasn't just the changes she'd implemented. It was something deeper, something she hadn't seen. Something that, in her drive for success, she had overlooked. One of the first things she did was call a staff meeting, a company-wide meeting, where every employee, from front desk clerks to housekeeping staff, would be able to speak openly. It was time to address the elephant in the room. The day of the meeting, Vanessa stood at the front of the hotel's large conference room, her nerves a little on edge. She wasn't used to speaking in front of such a large crowd. Sure, she'd given countless speeches at conferences and events, but this was different. This was personal. As the employees began to trickle in, Vanessa saw familiar faces, many of whom had been with her since the beginning. She noticed the quiet murmurs among the crowd, the hesitant glances exchanged between staff members. The air was thick with tension. Vanessa could feel the weight of their expectations, but she was ready. She had to be. "Thank you all for coming," Vanessa began, her voice steady but firm. "I know things have been difficult lately. There's been tension, confusion, and frustration, and I want you to know I'm here to listen. I'm here to understand what's going on, and more importantly, to fix it." She paused, taking in the room, allowing her words to sink in. "When I built this hotel, I did it with all of you in mind. We've always been a team, and we've always strived to put our guests first. But lately I've realized that I may have lost sight of the most important part of this business. You, my people." The room went quiet. Vanessa could hear the soft rustling of papers, the shifting of feet, but no one spoke. "I've made changes," she continued, "and I've pushed for growth. But in doing so, I may have alienated some of you. I didn't listen when I should have. I didn't take the time to truly understand the struggles you've been facing, and for that, I'm sorry." There was an audible shift in the room, an unspoken acknowledgement that Vanessa had just taken responsibility for the unrest. She could see the walls beginning to come down, just a little, but it wasn't enough. She had to do more. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," she said, her tone more forceful now. "I'm asking for your honesty. I need you to tell me how we can fix this. What changes do we need to make to ensure that we're not just another hotel, but a place that cares about each and every one of you, the people who make this business what it is?" There was a long pause, and then one of the housekeepers, a woman named Maria, stood up. Vanessa recognized her immediately. Maria had been with the hotel from the very beginning, one of the first hires, a dedicated worker with a warm smile. "I think the problem is that we've been left out of the conversation," Maria said, her voice quiet but clear. "The changes you've made, they're great for the business, but they don't always make sense for the people on the ground. We don't feel like we have a say anymore." Vanessa nodded, absorbing the feedback. "I hear you, and you're right. I've been so focused on the bigger picture that I haven't been paying attention to the details that make a difference in your day-to-day lives. I promise you that's going to change." One by one, other staff members began to speak up, sharing their frustrations, their concerns, and even their ideas. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Vanessa knew that this meeting was just the first step in the healing process. The real work would come after. But as the meeting continued, a shift began to occur. People were starting to feel heard. They were starting to believe that their voices mattered. Vanessa was no longer the distant CEO who only cared about profits and expansion. She was Vanessa, a leader who cared about her people, who listened. Later, that evening, Vanessa sat in her office, the weight of the day pressing down on her. The staff meeting had gone better than she had expected. There was still work to be done, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like she had some control. Again, she picked up her phone and dialed Sarah's number. It rang a few times before Sarah picked up. Vanessa, Sarah's voice was cold, but there was an underlying tension in it. "What is it?" "I've made some decisions," Vanessa began, her voice firm. "I'm restructuring things. We're going to start putting more emphasis on communication and inclusivity. I'm going to personally meet with the staff on a regular basis to ensure that they're heard." There was a long pause before Sarah responded. "That's a start, I guess. But are you really ready to go back to the way things were? To give up on the growth? To let go of the changes you fought so hard for?" Vanessa took a deep breath. "I'm not giving up, Sarah. I'm evolving. The hotel is evolving. And if you can't get on board with that, then maybe it's time we have a bigger conversation about your future here." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then finally Sarah spoke. "I'll be in touch," she said quietly. Vanessa hung up the phone, feeling a sense of resolve wash over her. She wasn't backing down, not this time. She was going to rebuild what had been broken, brick by brick, person by person. And if Sarah or anyone else wasn't willing to be a part of that, then they would be left behind. Vanessa had thought she had turned a corner. After the meeting with her staff, there had been an unexpected sense of optimism in the air. She felt like she was finally rebuilding the broken trust and reconnecting with her employees, bringing Johnson Heights Hotel back to its roots. The hotel, after all, wasn't just about business. It was about family. And it was time to restore that sense of family. But even in the midst of her newfound hope, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Sarah's cold response from the other day still lingered in the back of her mind, like a warning bell she couldn't quite ignore. She had hoped Sarah would come around, that she would see the wisdom in Vanessa's new approach. But what if she hadn't? What if Sarah and perhaps others were plotting something more dangerous than Vanessa had imagined? It wasn't long before Vanessa got her answer. That evening, she received an email that made her heart drop to her stomach. It was from one of her trusted managers, Jake, who had worked with her since the hotel first opened. Jake had always been loyal, at least that's what she had thought. But the email was about a secret meeting that had taken place earlier that week, a meeting involving Sarah and a few other key staff members. The contents of the email were chilling. In the meeting, Sarah had been openly criticizing Vanessa's leadership, claiming that the hotel was being run into the ground and that the only way forward was for someone else to take control. Jake had written about how Sarah had said that it was time for the real leadership to emerge. Vanessa's hands shook as she scrolled through the email, reading the details that confirmed her worst fear. There were others in her team who were just as dissatisfied with her leadership as Sarah was. And they weren't just complaining. They were actively working behind her back to orchestrate a hostile takeover of the hotel. The betrayal stung more than she could have ever imagined. She had trusted Sarah. She had trusted them to help her build this hotel, to help her make her dream a reality. And now she found herself fighting a battle not just against the competition outside, but against the very people she had fought so hard to protect. Vanessa sat back in her chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. What now? What could she do to stop this before it was too late? Her mind raced through her options. She could confront Sarah directly, but there was a real risk of it blowing up in her face. It could push Sarah, and the others, further away, possibly, causing an irreversible fracture in the team, or she could play it smart and get ahead of this conspiracy, dealing with it in a way that wouldn't alert anyone to her suspicions until she had all the evidence. But how? Vanessa needed a plan. A solid plan. The following day, she gathered her most trusted advisors, Jake, the operations manager, and Laura, the head of HR. They were two of the few people she still trusted implicitly within the hotel. She needed their help if she was going to take this betrayal head-on. Jake and Laura arrived at her office promptly, and after exchanging pleasantries, Vanessa didn't waste any time getting to the point. "I have a serious problem," she began, her voice tight with frustration. "Sarah and a few others are plotting against me. They've been working behind my back to undermine my leadership, and they've even discussed taking control of the hotel." Jake looked shocked. "Are you sure? That's a serious accusation, Vanessa." Vanessa nodded, pushing the email across the table. "This is from one of our own managers who attended the meeting. They're actively trying to organize a coup. I need to act quickly before this spreads any further." Laura, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "We've got to tread carefully. If we go in too aggressively, it might fuel the fire. But if we don't act, it'll only get worse. We need to gather more information, something concrete that can't be ignored." Vanessa took a deep breath, thinking through her options. "I agree. I can't afford to make any rash moves. What I need from both of you is help in getting the full story. Jake, I need you to start talking to the managers and staff you trust. See what they know. And Laura, I need you to begin documenting everything that's been happening with Sarah and the others. I need hard proof." Both Jake and Laura nodded, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. Vanessa watched as they left her office, each with a sense of determination that matched her own. But even as she gave them their assignments, a gnawing feeling in the pit of her stomach told her that this was only the beginning of something much darker. The days that followed were tense, filled with hushed conversations, covert meetings, and whispered rumors. Vanessa found herself more and more on edge as the stakes continued to rise. Every moment she wasn't actively working to stop the plot felt like one more step closer to losing everything she had worked for. Then one evening, Vanessa received a phone call from Laura. Her voice was urgent, almost breathless. "I've got something," Laura said. "I've managed to get a hold of an audio recording of one of Sarah's meetings with the others. It's exactly what we need." Sarah admitted to everything. The betrayal, the plot, everything. Vanessa's heart raced. "How did you—" "I've got a source inside her team," Laura replied quickly, "and they've been feeding me information. I'll send you the recording now." Vanessa could barely contain her excitement. This was it, the evidence she needed to finally take control of the situation. The recording would expose everything, and with it she could put an end to Sarah's treachery once and for all. But just as she was about to breathe a sigh of relief, a new thought crossed her mind. What if this wasn't just about Sarah? What if there was a larger conspiracy at play here? What if this wasn't just a betrayal? It was a full-blown attempt to destroy her company. Vanessa's hands gripped the phone tighter. The stakes had never been higher. Vanessa paced back and forth in her office, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The recording Laura had sent her was clear. Sarah and the others had plotted behind her back, discussing how to take control of Johnson Heights Hotel. It was more than just a betrayal. It was an outright attempt to ruin everything Vanessa had worked for. Her fingers gripped the edge of her desk, knuckles white as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. She had the proof now, the smoking gun. It was time to confront Sarah, but Vanessa knew that it wasn't going to be easy. Sarah had always been ambitious, but this was treacherous. Vanessa had to act fast. If Sarah realized that Vanessa knew, she might try to cover her tracks, or worse, she could go on the offensive and turn the entire hotel against her. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. She wasn't just going to confront Sarah. She was going to take control of the situation once and for all. An hour later, Sarah entered Vanessa's office, her usual air of confidence now tinged with a subtle unease. Vanessa had made sure the door was closed and the blinds drawn. This wasn't going to be a conversation for anyone else's ears. "Vanessa, you wanted to see me." Sarah's voice was smooth, too smooth, as though she were trying to mask the tension that hung in the air between them. Vanessa didn't waste any time. "Yes, Sarah, I have something I need to discuss with you," she said, her voice firm but calm. She placed the phone on the table, and the audio recording of Sarah's meeting played out loud. The sound filled the room, Sarah's voice clear, her words chilling. Vanessa has no idea. It's time we take control of the hotel. It's the only way we're going to survive. She's too distracted with the expansion. She's out of touch. We need someone who gets it. Sarah's eyes widened as she heard her own voice. The color drained from her face, and for a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. She quickly reached for the phone, but Vanessa stopped her. No, Sarah. Let it play, Vanessa said, her tone sharp. The room was silent, as the rest of the conversation played out, with Sarah detailing how she'd already started reaching out to other managers and key staff members about the plot. She spoke about how they would need to move fast if they wanted to pull off the takeover without Vanessa noticing. When the recording finally ended, Vanessa sat back, her eyes never leaving Sarah's. You've been planning this behind my back, Vanessa said quietly, the hurt evident in her voice, though she tried to keep it under control. All this time I trusted you. I built this hotel with you at my side, and you've been working against me. Sarah's face was a mask of fear and defiance. Vanessa, you don't understand. You're not cut out for this. You've changed, and not in a good way. The hotel isn't the same anymore, and you— She stopped, her voice faltering as she realized just how exposed she was. Vanessa leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. I've changed? Sarah, this hotel has always been about more than just business. It's about the people, the staff, the guests, the community. You've lost sight of that. This is about loyalty, trust, not your ambition to take control. For a long moment, Sarah remained silent, her anger and fear fighting for dominance in her expression. Then she spoke, her voice low and laced with venom. You don't get it, do you? You're not a leader anymore. You're too caught up in your image, in being the successful CEO. But you failed. The hotel is falling apart, and you're too blind to see it. Vanessa stood up, moving slowly around the desk, her body tense but controlled. You're wrong, Sarah. You think the hotel's failing, but the real failure is in you. You've lost sight of everything that made this place special. The people who work here, the relationships we built. You've been so busy trying to tear it all down that you forgot why we're here in the first place. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Sarah's eyes flickered between anger and regret, but Vanessa wasn't finished. This was the moment she'd been building toward. You've crossed a line, Sarah. I'll make sure the rest of the staff knows the truth about what you've been doing. I'm not going to let you destroy everything I've worked for. You can leave now before this gets any uglier. Sarah's jaw tightened. She looked like she was about to say something, some final retort, but then she seemed to think better of it. With a tight-lipped expression, she turned and walked out of the office, leaving Vanessa standing in the center of the room, her breath steady, but her heart racing. As Sarah left, Vanessa sank back into her chair. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the glass of water on her desk, taking a long drink to steady herself. She had done it. She had confronted Sarah and taken control of the situation. But there was a lingering question. What next? Sarah wasn't just a disgruntled employee. She was a force, someone who had managed to manipulate others into joining her plot. Vanessa knew this wasn't the end. If anything, it was just the beginning of an even greater battle, one that would determine not only the future of the hotel, but the future of her entire career. The next day, Vanessa called an emergency meeting with her management team. The stakes were high now. She had dealt with Sarah, but there was still the matter of the other staff members who had been complicit in the betrayal. She couldn't afford to let this fester any longer. As the team filed into the conference room, Vanessa's mind raced through the possibilities. Would she need to let people go? Would she need to completely reorganize the hotel's leadership? She had to be decisive. Anything less would show weakness. And right now, showing weakness wasn't an option. The moment. The room quieted. Vanessa stood up, her voice firm and unwavering. There's been a breach of trust within this hotel, a serious one. Yesterday I confronted Sarah. I now have to make some hard decisions, not only for the hotel, but for the future of all of you as well. The room fell into complete silence as Vanessa laid out the facts, everything from the betrayal to the steps she would take moving forward. She needed transparency. She needed loyalty, and most importantly, she needed to rebuild the hotel from the inside out. Vanessa's confrontation with Sarah had given her the strength to take charge again, but the real work was just beginning. In the next chapter, Vanessa must navigate the fallout from Sarah's betrayal while working to reclaim the heart and soul of Johnson Heights Hotel. Would she be able to rebuild the trust she had lost, or would the damage be too great? The days following Vanessa's confrontation with Sarah were filled with tension. The hotel, once bustling with energy, now felt like a battlefield. The atmosphere had changed. Staff members whispered behind closed doors, unsure of where they stood in the aftermath. Vanessa could feel the weight of it all, the hotel's future on her shoulders, the betrayal still fresh, and now the task of rebuilding trust hanging over her head like a storm cloud. Vanessa had always prided herself on creating an environment where employees felt like family. She had never thought it would come to this, that she would be forced to defend her leadership and fight to keep the very foundation of the business intact. But here she was, in a fight for survival, not just against competitors, but against those within her own ranks. The first step, Vanessa knew, was communication. She had to be transparent with her staff, even if it meant facing uncomfortable truths. The last thing she wanted was more secrecy, no more betrayal, no more whispers behind closed doors. She needed to bring everyone into the light. The next morning, Vanessa called another all-staff meeting. This time it was personal. She wasn't going to sugarcoat things. She needed to address the situation head-on and rebuild what had been broken. As the employees trickled into the conference room, Vanessa stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. There was a mix of apprehension and curiosity in the air. She could feel the eyes of the staff on her, wondering what she would say. They had heard the rumors. They knew something had happened with Sarah, but they hadn't heard the full story. Vanessa cleared her throat and began. I'm sure many of you have heard the rumors circulating around the hotel, and some of you may have already heard about the situation with Sarah. I want to be honest with all of you. We've had a serious betrayal in our ranks, and I take full responsibility for not seeing it sooner. Sarah and a few others tried to undermine the vision of this hotel, and they tried to do it behind our backs. She paused, letting her words sink in. I know this is hard to hear, and I know many of you may feel betrayed yourselves. I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to tell you that this hotel has always been about you, the people who work here. It's about the trust we build with one another. And right now, I need your help to rebuild that trust. There was a long silence. As Vanessa's words echoed in the room, she could see the mix of emotions on the staff's faces: anger, disappointment, confusion, but also something else. Hope. They wanted to believe in her. They wanted to believe in the hotel. Vanessa continued, her voice unwavering. I know this won't be easy. Trust takes time to rebuild, and I'll have to earn back each and every one of you. But I promise you this, I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to restore the culture we built together. We're a team, and we'll move forward as one. The room remained silent for a moment longer, but then slowly, a few employees began to clap. It was hesitant at first, but soon the entire room was clapping. It wasn't just for her, it was for the hope of something better. They wanted to believe in her again. Vanessa smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. This was the beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now she had their attention and their support. In the days that followed, Vanessa worked tirelessly to rebuild the hotel's culture. She held one-on-one meetings with each department, listened to their concerns, and worked to re-establish a sense of community among the staff. It wasn't just about fixing the problems left in the wake of Sarah's betrayal. It was about reinforcing the values that had made Johnson Heights Hotel successful in the first place. But as much as Vanessa tried to focus on the positive changes she was making, there was one lingering issue. Sarah's absence from the hotel was palpable. Her departure had left a void, one that no one was sure how to fill. Some employees were relieved, while others were unsure what to make of her departure. The loyalty within the staff was divided. and Vanessa knew that she needed to be careful as she navigated the delicate balance between rebuilding and facing the damage Sarah had caused. One afternoon, as Vanessa walked through the lobby, she spotted someone she hadn't expected to see. It was Jake, the operations manager who had initially alerted her to the plot. He was standing by the reception desk, talking quietly to Laura, the head of HR. Vanessa walked over, her curiosity piqued. "Everything okay?" she asked. Jake looked up, his expression serious. "Yeah, everything's fine, I think it's time we talk about what happens next, about Sarah's departure and what it means for the hotel's leadership." Vanessa's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Laura spoke up, her tone measured. "Well, Sarah was a big player in this hotel. She had a lot of influence, and now that she's gone, we're left with some gaps. We need to think about how we want to fill those gaps, both in terms of leadership and morale. I know you're working on rebuilding the team, but we need a clear vision moving forward. We need to come together as a unified front." Vanessa nodded slowly, taking in what Laura was saying. "I know, I've been thinking about that too, but it's not just about leadership positions. It's about trust, and that's what I'm focused on now. Rebuilding the trust. If we can't do that, it doesn't matter who we put in charge." Jake agreed. "You're right. But the truth is, you've got a lot of work ahead of you. It's going to take time, a lot of time." Vanessa took a deep breath. She knew Jake was right, but there was something else that weighed on her heart. The longer Sarah's absence went unaddressed, the more questions would linger. There would be doubts, and those doubts would continue to eat away at the foundation she was trying to rebuild. That evening, Vanessa made a decision. She would address the leadership issue head-on. She couldn't afford to wait any longer. The hotel needed direction, and she needed to show the staff that she had a plan for moving forward. In the next chapter, Vanessa begins the process of filling the gaps in leadership, but her past with Sarah might come back to haunt her. Will she be able to make the right decisions, or will the weight of the past prevent her from leading the hotel into its future? The tension in the hotel had started to settle, but Vanessa knew the real challenge was just beginning. The storm caused by Sarah's betrayal had calmed, but the aftershocks would continue to affect the staff and the hotel's future for months, maybe even years. The hardest part wasn't just confronting the immediate problem, it was what came next. The hotel needed new leadership, and Vanessa needed to fill the gaps Sarah had left behind. But with every decision, there was a lingering question. Who could she trust now? That evening, after a long day of meetings and planning, Vanessa sat in her office, staring at a list of potential candidates for the leadership positions. Most of the names were familiar, but after everything that had happened, there was a part of her that felt like she didn't know who to trust anymore. She sighed and rubbed her temples, trying to focus. What's the right move here, she thought. The entire hotel depended on her decisions in this moment, and the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm her. The sound of a knock on her door snapped her out of her thoughts. "Come in," Vanessa called. The door creaked open, and Laura stepped in, her expression unreadable. Vanessa gestured to the chair across from her. "You look like you have something to say." Laura sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "Vanessa, I know things have been tough, the staff, and they're still on edge. They want to see that you've got a clear vision. They want to know that the hotel is moving forward, and right now, they're looking to you for that direction." Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "I'm well aware, but it's not just about direction. It's about trust. And after what happened with Sarah, it feels like I'm building a foundation on sand." Laura nodded, her gaze steady. "I understand, but you're not alone in this. I've been talking to some of the staff, and they still believe in you. The ones who've stayed are loyal. It's just, we need to fill the leadership void. We need to bring in someone who can rally the troops." Vanessa felt a pang of discomfort. She had always been able to rely on Sarah, and now the absence of that familiar face made her feel exposed. "And what if I make the wrong choice?" "You won't," Laura said, her voice firm. "I'm here to help, and I think we should consider promoting from within. People like Jake and Rachel, people who've been with the hotel through thick and thin. They understand the culture here. They get what this place is about. They'll know how to lead." Vanessa nodded thoughtfully. Jake and Rachel. were both strong candidates, trustworthy, hard-working, and dedicated to the hotel. But there was still the fear that she might be overlooking something, or that there was another option out there that she hadn't considered. The following day, Vanessa gathered the leadership team for a meeting. The room was filled with her, most trusted department heads, people who had proven their worth through loyalty and perseverance. There was an air of uncertainty, but Vanessa wasn't going to let that shake her. "I called this meeting because we've got a lot of work to do," Vanessa began, her voice steady. "We've been through a lot as a team, and now it's time to rebuild. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Trust was broken, and we need to fix it. That starts with leadership." She paused, letting her words settle in. "I've been thinking a lot about who should take on the vacant leadership positions. I believe we need to stay within the hotel family and promote from within. This place is built on trust, and the people who've been here through it all are the ones who understand our culture the best." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each person there. "So I'm proposing a new direction for us. Jake, Rachel, you've both shown immense dedication to the hotel, and I trust you both. I'd like to offer you the opportunity to step into new leadership roles. I believe you're ready to take on more responsibility." Jake and Rachel exchanged glances, both surprised but clearly honored. They nodded in agreement, understanding the weight of the decision. But before they could respond, Vanessa's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down at the screen and saw that it was a message from one of the security staff. "Sarah's back." "She's here." Vanessa's stomach dropped. She had expected Sarah to try and make a comeback eventually, but she hadn't expected it to happen so soon. After everything, after all the damage Sarah had caused, she had the audacity to return. The room was quiet as Vanessa processed the message. Her heart raced. "What's going on, Laura?" she asked, looking at her HR head. "I don't know," Laura replied, her brow furrowing. "We'll handle it. We'll figure out why she's back." Vanessa's mind was already racing ahead. This was a new twist, one she hadn't prepared for. She had just taken a big step in rebuilding her team, and now Sarah's unexpected return could jeopardize everything. "Get security to escort her to my office," Vanessa said, her voice cold but resolute. "I need to talk to her, and we'll do this in front of the team. No more behind the scenes. Tactics." It didn't take long for Sarah to arrive at the door of Vanessa's office, flanked by 2 security guards. She looked different, haggard, maybe even a little desperate, but the same fiery determination that had made her such a formidable adversary remained in her eyes. Vanessa gestured for her to come in, and Sarah walked into the room with her head held high, though there was a nervousness in her steps that she hadn't shown before. "Vanessa," Sarah said, her voice soft but with an edge. "I know what you're thinking, but I'm here to make amends. I've realized my mistakes and I want to make things right." Vanessa crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You've got a lot of nerve, Sarah. After everything you've done, you think you can just walk back in and make amends?" "I was wrong," Sarah said, her tone more earnest now. "I was blinded by ambition and I didn't see the bigger picture. I'm asking for a chance to prove myself, to show you that I can be part of this team again." Vanessa studied her for a long moment. Could she trust Sarah again? Would it be possible for them to work together after everything that had happened? Finally, Vanessa spoke, her voice unwavering. "You may have a chance, but it won't be easy. You'll have to earn back every bit of trust you've lost, and you'll be starting from the bottom, just like anyone else who's new to the team." Sarah nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "I understand, thank you." Vanessa glanced at Jake and Rachel, who were watching intently. "I need your help in making this decision," Vanessa said. "But for now, Sarah, you'll stay in a support role. You'll need to prove yourself before you can even think about moving back into a leadership position." As Sarah left the room, Vanessa felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't the perfect resolution, far from it, but it was a step forward. She had regained control of the situation, and the hotel was beginning to feel like a team again. The weeks following Sarah's return were a mix of tension and cautious optimism. Vanessa had given Sarah a chance to prove herself, but the road to regaining the trust of the hotel's team was anything but smooth. As the days passed, Vanessa noticed that while Sarah was trying to keep a low profile, there were still murmurs among the staff, whispers of doubt, lingering distrust, and the undeniable tension that came with a betrayal that had rocked the entire foundation of the hotel. Vanessa knew that it would take more than just Sarah's presence in a support role to heal the wounds. She had made progress, yes, but the true test would come when the hotel faced its next challenge. One morning, as Vanessa walked into the hotel's lobby, she noticed something out of place. A group of customers was gathered by the front desk, clearly frustrated. The desk clerk was visibly flustered, trying to manage the situation, but the tension was thick. Vanessa approached, her professional demeanor quickly taking over. "What's going on here?" she asked, directing her question to the desk clerk. We've had a series of booking errors," the clerk replied, her voice shaky. "There's been some confusion with reservations, and a few of our regulars are angry about the mix-up." Vanessa's mind raced. The last thing she needed was more turmoil. "Where's Sarah?" she asked, looking toward the back office. She had put Sarah in charge of overseeing operations that day. The desk clerk hesitated before speaking. "She's in a meeting with the operations team, but I don't think she's aware of the situation at the front desk." Vanessa frowned. She couldn't let this slide. She needed to step in, now. "Okay, I'll handle it. You stay here and keep the guests as calm as you can." As she took charge, the customers seemed to calm down somewhat, but the damage had already been done. Vanessa wasn't just dealing with a logistical issue. This was another blow to the hotel's reputation, especially in the wake of Sarah's earlier betrayal. The staff was underperforming, and that was something Vanessa could no longer ignore. Later that day, Vanessa called a meeting with Sarah, Rachel, and Jake. It was time for a serious conversation about the future of the hotel and the leadership roles within it. Sarah walked in, her expression cautious. Rachel and Jake were already seated at the table, exchanging looks. Vanessa, holding a folder of reports, didn't waste time getting to the point. "Sarah, I want to address the issue that happened this morning." "The booking errors," Vanessa began, her tone stern but measured. "This wasn't just a minor mistake. It was a breakdown in communication and organization, and frankly, I'm disappointed." Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but Vanessa held up a hand. "Let me finish. I know you're doing your best, but your performance so far hasn't met the standard we need. I'm not here to sugarcoat it. If we're going to move forward, I need to know, can you handle the responsibilities of a leadership role? Can I trust you to make decisions that will keep the hotel running smoothly?" For a long moment, Sarah was silent. She clearly wanted to defend herself, to explain why things hadn't gone according to plan, but she couldn't deny the truth. Vanessa's eyes bore into hers, waiting for an answer. Finally, Sarah spoke, her voice steady but soft. I realize now that I've been too focused on my own ambitions. I let that cloud my judgment, and I didn't give the hotel or the team the respect it deserves. I want to do better. I'll work hard to earn back your trust. I'll prove I can handle this role." Vanessa studied Sarah's face. Was it genuine? Could she really change? "All right," Vanessa said slowly. "You'll get one more chance, but I need you to understand that this is your last opportunity. I won't tolerate mistakes like this again. We're rebuilding, and I need everyone on board." Over the next few weeks, Sarah worked hard to prove herself. There were moments when Vanessa still doubted her, moments when the old skepticism crept back in. But little by little, Sarah began to show signs of growth. She communicated more clearly with the team, took responsibility for the problems, and started implementing changes to ensure that the operational errors didn't repeat. Despite everything, Vanessa began to feel a shift. The hotel was slowly coming back together. Staff morale was improving, and even though there were still occasional setbacks, they were nothing like the chaos of the past few months. It was a Friday evening, and Vanessa stood in the hotel's lobby, watching the evening rush of guests. The place felt different now, calmer, more confident. It had been a long road to get here, but they had made it. The journey had been filled with bumps, betrayals, and moments of uncertainty, but they had persevered. She was about to walk into her office when Laura caught up with her. "Vanessa, there's something you need to see," Laura said, a hint of excitement in her voice. Vanessa followed Laura into the small conference room, where a digital presentation was already running. It was a report on the hotel's current performance, with a significant increase in bookings, positive guest reviews, and rising satisfaction scores. "This is incredible," Vanessa murmured, her heart swelling with pride. Laura smiled. "It's all thanks to you, Vanessa. You turned everything around, and the staff, they're loyal to you now. You've rebuilt this place from the ground up." Vanessa's eyes scanned the numbers, but she couldn't help but smile. This was more than just a business turnaround. It was a personal victory. She had faced impossible odds, and yet here she was, stronger, more confident, and more certain of her place in the world. As Vanessa walked out of the conference room, she caught sight of Sarah in the distance. The two women made eye contact, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of understanding between them. Sarah had come back from the brink of disaster, and while Vanessa wasn't ready to fully trust her yet, she had to admit, it was a step forward. They were no longer enemies. They were two women, leading the same hotel, with a shared mission to succeed. As Vanessa walked back into the lobby, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The hotel was hers again, and this time, it was going to stay that way. The road ahead wasn't without challenges, but Vanessa was ready to face them. She had learned the hard way that leadership wasn't just about making decisions. It was about trusting yourself and your team, and sometimes giving people the chance to prove they can change. The Johnson Heights Hotel was back on track, and this time no one, was going to stand in her way. Thank you for following Vanessa's journey. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. What would you do if you were in Vanessa's shoes? How would you rebuild trust after betrayal? Let us know.